All right, folks, we're almost there. We had some technical issues there. All right, Jane Elliott, are you there?
Yes,
All right, we got you. Glad to see you.
sure did. Good for you. I'd like to see you, but I can't. I'm sure I know what you look like.
Yeah. Well, we have with FaceTime. We run it through our system, and so unfortunately you can't see me. But the most important thing, the audience can see you. They can hear you. Let's just get with it. We've been talking about obviously the loss of Congressman John Lewis, and I was telling people you started this work the day after the assassination of Dr. King.
Yes.
Why? What was that? Why did you say I have to commit myself to this?
Because I was teaching third graders in all white, all Christian Riceville, Iowa. And Martin Luther King Jr. had been one of our heroes of the month in February, along with George Washington, who owned slaves, bought and sold people for money. And incidentally, never told a lie. We can't say that about our present president. Abraham Lincoln, who obviously was our first black president since he was part black, part white, and part Cherokee Indian. And he refused to free the slaves until he absolutely had to. Davy Crockett was one of our heroes of the month in February, and he was killed while he was killing Texans while we tried to take over part of Mexico. So those were really unfortunate heroes because I was teaching racism and didn't realize it. But because he had been one of our heroes of the month in February, when I found out that he was dead, when I came into my house that night with the teepee that my previous year's third graders had made, we were going to put up in the classroom the next day. My sister called and said, "Better turn on your television." Why? Because they shot him. I said, "Who'd we shoot this time?" And she said, Martin Luther King Jr. And for a minute, the world stopped spinning. And I can't talk about it without getting sick to my stomach. I have a physical reaction to that sentence every time I say it, because he offered hope to all of us, not just to black people, but to all of us, to rid ourselves of the idiocy of treating people positively or negatively on the basis of a chemical in their skin. And I was absolutely furious. Our lesson plan the next day was to learn the Sioux Indian prayer that says, "Oh, Great Spirit, keep me from ever judging a man until I've walked a mile in his moccasins." And I decided at that moment that the next morning I was going to teach them that prayer, and I was going to arrange to have it answered for them, because I decided that I was going to allow my students to walk in the shoes of a child of color in this country for a day. I was going to separate my kids according to the color of their eyes, and I learned that from Adolf Hitler. I didn't create this exercise. I learned it from Adolf Hitler. That's one of the ways we decided who went into the gas chamber. He decided who went into the gas chamber during the Holocaust. And the next morning, I went into my classroom. We talked about race. We talked about blacks. They knew every negative stereotype I had ever heard about blacks, and some I hadn't heard. And I finally said, "How do you kids know these things are true?" And they said, "Because my dad said so." And at that moment, I decided, okay, you're going to find out that your dad's wrong. And I separated them according to the color of their eyes and treated the blue-eyed people, and I'm blue-eyed, I treated the blue-eyed people as though they were less than brown-eyed people. And I immediately found out what racism is about. The first thing I found out is I'm a racist. Little brown-eyed Debbie sitting in the front row, brown-eyed Debbie. When I said blue-eyed people aren't as smart as brown-eyed people, they aren't as clean as brown-eyed people, they're as civilized as brown-eyed people, that little 8-year-old looked up at me and said, "How come you're the teacher here if you got them blue eyes?" And I thought, there it is. There it is. She has the power now, because she has the right color eyes, to confront me, to criticize me, and to show me where I'm wrong. And then Alan Moss, blue-eyed Alan Moss, stood up in the back and said, if she didn't have them blue eyes, she'd be the principal or the superintendent. And I thought, there it is again. This kid knows how to be a racist. Who taught him what words he should use to defend his race? It was absolutely terrifying.
Whenever I see videos, I love seeing the videos, and the look of fear on the face. You scare the hell out of white people, Jane.
I know I do. I really do, especially adult white males. They are absolute. But hey, we start out scared now because and number one, I don't like to use the word white. I would prefer to use melanemic, because if you don't have enough iron.
Say it again. Mela what?
Melanemic.
Melanemic. Got it.
Melanemic, because if you don't have enough iron in your body, you are anemic. If you don't have enough melanin in your skin to give your skin some color, you're melanemic. Now, that's not a scientific term, but it will be. And right now, the demographics of this country say that within 30 years, white people, so-called white people, pale faces, will be a numerical minority in the United States of America. And that frightens melanemic people literally to death in some cases.
And when talking to melanemic folks, it is amazing. Well, it's not amazing because we get it, but just the sheer number of people who clearly know nothing about history. And I keep saying it's all about his story. You see Senator Tom Cotton, he is just going nuts about the 1619 Project, and they think it's just this abomination. And how dare you say this nation was born on the backs of slavery and racism? No, 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 do not say that. That's not what our founding fathers were about.
No, what our founding fathers were about was killing the Indians first, and they weren't even Indians. We were killing the people who owned this land first. They didn't think they owned it, but who occupied it, and those people came from Africa too. You need to remember that. If you haven't read the April 2018 issue of the National Geographic magazine, you ought to get this magazine and read it. It will blow you away. You see these two girls?
Mm-hmm.
These are twins. Would you say they're biracial?
Wow.
Would you say they're biracial?
No.
Hell no, they aren't biracial. There's only one race on the face of the earth. It's a human race. Instead of calling people biracial, you call them mosaic, because a mosaic is an art form that is lovely, new, beautiful, and made of many different elements. Those kids aren't biracial. There's only one race unless one of their parents came from outer space. Neither of them did. I see the pictures of them in that magazine.
When we begin to, because you've talked about mosaic and you talked about melanemic. I love when people say words don't matter, but the reality is words are used as weapons in this country.
Words are the most powerful weapon devised by humankind. We use them to destroy people and nations and ideas all day, every day. But there are some words that are extremely important. Victor Hugo said, "No power on earth can stop a man with a dream or an idea whose time has come." Martin Luther King Jr. had a dream. We killed him. We killed him, and we killed Malcolm X. We did it deliberately. And if you haven't read the book Martin and Malcolm in America, you ought to get it and read it. However, his dream isn't done. His dream, we couldn't stop his dream. It's still alive, more alive than it was when he was alive. And nobody, no power on earth is going to be able to stop the idea of one race. The human race. That is an idea whose time has come, and we are going to spread it until the whole world realizes that we are all members of the same race. I have a sweatshirt on which it says, God created one race, the human race. Human beings created racism. Anything you create, you can destroy. We could destroy racism in 2 generations if we decided to, and we'd better decide to, because if we don't destroy it, that will destroy us.
When the George Floyd protest started and I saw who was coming out, and I said, y'all, this thing is not going to go away. And people are like, what are you talking about? I said, these are white folk, or these are melanemic folk.
That's right.
What has always scared power is when those two forces came together. And when you see what's happening in corporations, when you see what's happening, all of a sudden they start changing laws. You start having we're going to give 10 million. No, we're going to give 25 million. No, we got 100 million. What can we do? And now the ad agencies are releasing their diversity numbers, and this company and Adidas. And now you got white allies and black allies in companies who are joining forces. They'll say, no, what was happening to them was wrong. Y'all got to change this. These folks are totally freaking out.
I don't appreciate the use of the word ally, because an ally is a helper. Blacks don't need help. Blacks need to be in a partnership. We need to be in a partnership with all of these other people to make this thing work.
So not allies, partners.
But let's call it partnership instead of ally.
Got it. Okay.
There's a negative tone to ally as far as I'm concerned. It's a superiority, inferiority. We're going to help you up. Nonsense. We started this mess. We'll be helpful that blacks will partnership with us in putting a stop to it. But it's going to take all of us to do it. And we could do it if we chose to. If we really teach what Frederick Douglass said. Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. And that's what these kids are proving right now. I want those folks who are talking about it on the news to stop saying there are people of all races, including in this protest. There are not people of all races. There are a whole lot of people of different color groups, but all the same race. We've got to stop injecting the word race into everything we talk about.
When we see this force that's moving, and we're now on the 10th week since his murder, or Reverend Jim Lawson early in the show called it his execution. And I've been operating and talking to Reverend William Barber, saying that this is a third Reconstruction moment. That we shouldn't look at this as, well, we can change this, change that. No, this Reconstruction means reconstructing, rebuilding, not just saying, let's go to the old normal. Let's even just junk that, saying, no, here is the new pathway forward, how we should be operating in this country.
Because what we did was not normal. Deciding that it was all right to kill people if they don't look the way you do, that isn't normal. And that's how this whole thing started. It hasn't been 600 years ago that the Spanish Inquisition, Torquemada and company, decided that you couldn't tell what religion a person was by looking at them, but you could tell what color they were. So because they couldn't tell what your religion was, they had killed a bunch of Christians. So then they decided to kill people based on this color of their skin. That's how recent it is. That's how ignorant it is. That's how ridiculous it is. That's how painful it has been. And that's why it has to stop.
We're obviously living in this crazy age with a nutcase in the White House. Today, he was asked the question, will you go pay respects to Congressman John Lewis? He said no. Well, first of all, there's no shock.
But they should have said thank you to him. You want that person in the same place that somebody as remarkable as John Lewis is, and he's getting the attention? No, he probably did that out of kindness. He probably realized that everybody would be so excited about him that they wouldn't take a look at what was really important. So he was trying just to protect y'all.
Well, we certainly appreciate the orange one not swinging by. Although Pence and Ben Carson, they did drive by, but that's a whole nother story. But what's so interesting in this moment?
No, it's not a whole nother story. It's the same story with a different ending. It's not a whole nother story. Make no mistake about that. That the fact that Ben Carson is black doesn't make him black.
As they say, point. So
Oreo.
So when you look at who Trump is speaking to, the buttons that he's pushing, when you look at all of those different things that are happening, I mean, he is absolutely all about white fear. They're coming, they're coming, they're coming. Build this wall, they're coming. They are coming to take what is ours. We were on that panel in 2017, University of Michigan. Has it gotten worse? And how should a Biden, how should folks who don't like Trump, how should they counter what he is doing?
Throw him out of office. Just vote him out of office. And when Biden gets in there, stop the wall. Mr. T-Rump is going to build a wall to keep people who aren't Americans out of America. Because he doesn't know that America is everything from the northernmost point on Canada to the southernmost point on South America. Everybody in all those countries is an American. So for him to say we're going to keep those brown-skinned people out of here because they reproduce too rapidly, and he's going to build a wall to keep people who aren't Americans out, this is ridiculous. It is an example of his ignorance. The man isn't stupid. You can't fix stupid, but you can fix ignorance. And we need to fix his ignorance. He needs some education, and he needs it badly. But he isn't the only person in this country that needs to be re-educated. Most of our educators in schools in this country need to be re-educated. They need to read the book, The Myth of Race by Robert Wald Sussman, and they need to read Anthony Browder's Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, and they need to read Robert Reich's book, The System, Who Rigged It and How to Fix It. They need to re-educate themselves so that they teach the truth when and if we ever go back to school this year. It's time for educators to stop indoctrinating people and start educating them.
So I do have to ask you this here. Of course, when we're live streaming, so you've got some folks who take exception to you saying Ben Carson is not. They said Ben Carson is not black. They said that sounds like Joe Biden saying if you're black, you wouldn't vote for Trump. How would you respond to those folks who say, well, Jane, that's not right. Just because he has a different ideology, he's still black.
He is black on the outside and white on the inside, and he knows exactly how to act like a white man. You know it, and he knows it, and I know it. And that's how he gets where he is, and that's how he got close to Donald Trump. You know it, but we don't want to discuss that, but that's the way it is.
When we talk about this whole idea of being honest, I remember when President Bill Clinton had his race commission or whatever, and I remember I was asked, I said, "Nah," I said, "this is not going to be successful." And they said, "Why?" I said, "Because people are not going to be honest." I said, being honest means being hardcore. Being honest means hurting folks' feelings. And when I say hurting their feelings, meaning where you're not just, okay, hold up, let me couch it in this way. I think part of the issue is that we say, I love this, always say, well, let's have a conversation, let's have a dialogue. I don't think a lot of people really, really, really want to have that real conversation about this nation, discrimination, bigotry, race, all those things, because it forces folks to hold up huge mirrors. How then do we begin to affect change then if folk don't want to be honest?
We have to tell the truth, and we haven't told the truth. We have to stop doing things that promote racism. Columbus didn't discover America. You can't discover, Thor Heyerdahl says you can't discover a place where people are already living. They discovered it before you got there. The First Nations people came here from Africa. And if you think I'm lying about that, once again, there are lots and lots of places to find it. But go to this issue on the National Geographic magazine and look at this map. It shows where human beings started and how they moved from there to populate practically every landmass on the face of the earth. Do you not realize how brilliant they must have been? And they did it without any modern technology. Now, we have pretended to ourselves for about 300 years that Black people aren't as smart as so-called white people. They were here first, and every one of us, if we would trace our DNA back far enough, we would find out that we all have DNA from a country in Africa. We are here only because Black people were brave enough and creative enough and intelligent enough to make those voyages. We do not talk about that in history. We do not talk about the truth about Black history. We use 1 month for Black history. That's 20 minutes a day for 20 days, about 30 minutes some days, for 20 days. They call that Black history. If you're going to study Black history, you're going to have to use 9 months for an hour a day. We aren't going to do that, but that would be telling the truth. We need to realize how fantastic the people are that we have accused of being less than, and how much we have lost by denying what they are and how fantastic they are. Now, is every Black person a model of behavior? No, but every one of them knows more than we have allowed them to think they do. I watch what happens with adults when I do the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise with so-called adults. I watch people who are head CEOs who can't spell when they have the wrong color eyes, who can't say the words they want to say, who get mixed up and say, you know what I'm thinking. I say, no, I don't. See if you can express it now. Are you having a problem, Bluey? And immediately they become what I accuse them of being, and I can lower their IQs by treating them badly for an hour and a half. You don't believe it, but I've been hit by a white male, an adult white male during this exercise. I've had a knife pulled on me. They took me out of Uniontown, Pennsylvania late at night because the 400 teachers that I put through the exercise called the superintendent and said, if you don't get that bitch out of town, we're going to shoot her. People who, if you put white people for half an hour through what we do to people of color for a lifetime, you'll soon find out who has strength and who has character and who has neither.
Wow. And is it because of that test you are establishing from the jump inferiority?
Absolutely. And that's what we do in the schools all the time. And I'll never forget the Black woman, the teacher, educator in Des Moines, who started to cry after she came into the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise. She'd been in there for a few minutes, and she said, I do it to my own kind. When one of my Black boys comes into the room, I expect less of him. The first day I did that exercise, 4 of the students in that room were 4 of the brown-eyed students were dyslexic. They hadn't been able to read when I got them. On the day they were on the top in that exercise, they read words I knew they couldn't read, and they spelled words I knew they couldn't spell. And at the end of the day, brown-eyed Billy came up to my desk and said, Miss Elliott, where's my spelling paper? I said, what do you want it for, Billy? He said, because I want to show it to my mother. She thinks I can't spell, and I can. He didn't find out until April 5th of his 3rd grade year that he could spell. And I didn't find out that he could either, because he had been living down to my expectations of him, and I based my expectations of him on the kinds of things that his previous teachers said about him and his brother and his father in the Briceville Community Elementary School Teachers Lounge. We have expectations for children according to what our idiocy is, our ignorance is. And we force them to live down to our expectations of them. The children who bother us the most are the children who achieve better than we expect of them. And when that happens with students in my classroom whose previous teachers have called them unable to learn or disabled reader or is one of those, and they succeed, the other teachers say, well, she lied on the tests. No, you don't have to lie on the test if you expect your children to be as fantastic as they are. We have to stop allowing other people to define the children who come into our classroom. And we have to stop defining them according to the color of their skin, because that's an indication of the ignorance of the educator. In fact, most teachers aren't educators. Most teachers teach facts and figures and get kids ready for the next grade. And I'm an educator. The word educator comes from the root dus, which means lead, the prefix e, which means out, the suffix ate, which means the act of, and the suffix or, which means one who does. An educator is one who is engaged in the act of leading people out of ignorance. And you can't do that by teaching the history that we teach in schools in this country, because it isn't history. It's hysteria. It is not the truth. We need to teach the truth. Do you really think that all the things that have been invented and created and all the adventures that people have had were done by white males? Because if you do, you're probably a graduate of the schools in the United States of America.
Or Trump University.
Congratulations. Or some university. And they've done studies that prove that the longer you stay in school, the more bigoted you become, because that's more years in which you are reinforced, in which you learn grades K through 12.
See, I'm glad you said I'm glad you said that, because I remember in 2000 I was watching the presidential debate, and it was George W. Bush, Al Gore, and this question came up, and Bush's answer to the issue of how do we deal with racism was education. And I was at my home in the Dallas area, and I started yelling, "No, idiot! There are a bunch of racists with PhDs."
Yeah, but if we would re-educate them, then they could do a better job of educating others. If you haven't read the book, The Color of Law, if you haven't read that book,
Indeed,
read it, and you'll find out what. Go on.
I've interviewed the author. Yep.
Hello.
Yep. Which deals with. I want to stay on this re-educate part, because I'm reading Dorothy Cotton's book, If Your Back's Not Bent. And she had this great passage in there where she talked about people who wanted to join the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. They would bring them through their citizen education program, and they would assess them to determine whether they need to be reprogrammed. And I've said on this show, in the speeches, that African Americans need to be reprogrammed, because to your point of that teacher, because of white supremacy, we repeat these things. We say things, oh, well, it's a black business, which says second class. You know how we are, which says second class. And I said, what we have to understand is that we have been indoctrinated into believing that we are inferior and we're not as smart as, and we should be deferring to whites as well. So this notion of re-educating, I've been arguing for African Americans, has to happen as well, because that has to be removed from our system and make sure it's not infecting and affecting our children. Every African American
who doesn't identify as white, which is, take that one away. Every African American has to get Anthony Browder's book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. You have to read that, and you have to have that for your children, and you have to tell them, look at all the things that blacks had before they were invaded by white people. Look at these marvelous things that they've done. Realize that Egypt is a country in Africa, but we have moved it into the Middle East so that we don't have to admit that all those marvelous things that we got from Egypt came from black people. You have to read that book, and children have to read that book. Children have to hear that book. Children also have to see this book, The Color of Man. Every kid should see this book, because all the pictures of beautiful children in this book, and it tells where color came from and why we ought to stop identifying as either as white. It makes no sense. And they ought to look at the National Geographic magazine and see these pictures. See all these different colored people? Each of them has a color on the Pantone color wheel. These are all the pictures of colors of human beings. None of these people is this color because people do not come in this color. We've got to wipe out the idea of skin color having any relevance whatsoever to our value as human beings.
When this idea of re-educating, I think, Jane, for so many people that they run from that because it's like, so what are you saying? I'm dumb? No. What I'm saying is, if you don't know, you don't know.
That's right. But you can't teach what you don't know.
Right.
And if teachers don't know what I just said, they ought not to be teaching. They ought to go into another line of work. For instance, look at this map. You see this map? Are you familiar with this map? See Greenland hanging down here like a great big red plum.
Mm-hmm.
And see poor little South America here. According to the legend at the bottom of most of these Mercator maps, South America is actually 9 times larger than Greenland. Now that's a fact. Does this map show it? Nope. But this is the map that we use throughout the schools in the United States of America. It's time to stop doing that. It's time to get a different map. There's a better way. This is the Peters projection map. Look at Greenland on this map. Look at poor little Greenland up here. See here? See how tiny that is?
Mm.
See, Donald Trump wanted to buy Greenland because he thought it was this big. Greenland is only this big. Is this an important fact? I think this is an extremely important fact. And I think everybody should send to capital O, capital D, capital T, maps.com and order copies of the Peters projection map and insist that they be shown in the schools, in every school when they open up this fall, because kids have a right to see the truth instead of the lie.
So again, as we unpack that simple map you just laid out subconsciously says, oh, they're smaller, they're less than. But then also when you go ahead.
All the countries in the northern hemisphere are larger than the countries in the southern hemisphere on this map. On this map, the northern hemisphere takes up 2/3 of the map. So you can't even use the word hemi, the prefix hemi, which means half. You can't call it a hemisphere if you're going to use this map. You see, we teach against our teaching all the time.
When we talk to that particular point there, when we talk about, like, for instance, it's just stunning to me. Well, it's not stunning, but when you talk to folks and they go, yeah, that country Africa, and I just sit there and I'm like,
I'll show you something about that country Africa. Look at here. That country Africa is that continent Africa. And according to this, you could put the United States, Argentina, India, Europe, and China in that continent Africa. That's how big that continent is.
What we're talking about, centuries of this dominating view. And I'm going with the Tom Cotton. What scares folks like him, which is why he doesn't want that 1619 curriculum, because he doesn't want those white children in Arkansas and other states to actually realize the difference between history and his story. Because
that's right.
This mythology that they have created, they don't want it to be torn down because, oh my God, what's going to happen if we don't revere the founding fathers? We don't want to know about. That's why Sally Hemings was his mistress. No, Sally Hemings was his slave who he raped in order to have. I'm like, no, let's not play games here. And that's what it is. Their deal is like, you are about, Jane, they're saying, Jane, you are trying to screw this whole thing up that we set up. You have lost your mind, you and the rest of these people.
That's okay. People have accused me of that for years. Somebody said to me, several people have said to me recently, how is this being socially distanced for you? How is that? And I say, well, nothing new. I've been socially distanced ever since I did the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise 52 years ago. Don't tell me that being socially distanced is so bad. I understand that. I've experienced that. It's not a bad way to be. Sometimes, if your society is insane, you're better off if you're away from it.
Now, look, there are some black people out here who don't want to wear masks, who act a fool. But, Jane, I got to tell you,
Look,
these folks just are losing their damn mind.
tell them to get this mask. You see this mask? What does it say?
Get over it.
Get over it. Tell them to order this mask. Somebody sent it to me. I think this is the ideal mask for all of us to wear. Get over it, people. Get over the idea that you are something special because you're melanemic. Get over the idea that nobody knows as much as you do because you chose. I'll never forget the woman who said to me, white liberal woman, I don't dislike blacks. When I see one, I just think, there but for the grace of God go I. And then I attacked her. She thinks God woke up one morning and decided to make something beautiful, and God made her. I'll bet she'll never say that again. She said, you don't understand. I said, I understand exactly what you're saying. You're saying that God loves you because he must love you because he made you white. Well, number one, God's a spirit and has neither gender nor color, so it's not a he. Number two, God didn't make you white. You are white because some black people left Africa 300,000 years ago and moved to populate every landmass on the face of the earth. And you are a faded black person. Get used to it. She didn't speak to me after that, and I don't suppose she ever will again.
A faded black person. Oh yeah, you messed her up. So Jane, we have this segment on my show called Crazy Ass White People. And so all these videos of these Karens and Chads who are just losing their mind, calling the cops on folks. Jane, first of all, we got so many now. I mean, we gotta we can't play all of them because it's like it's you're accosting a brother who works at UPS, who works at FedEx. The woman the other day, the guy's just delivering food, and she's like, no, I know everybody in my building. I don't know who you are. I mean, that's the crazy stuff that we're seeing.
Right.
Jane, just
the guy who reads your meter walks across the lawn in Waterloo, Iowa, and the police are called. The man who asks a white woman to leash her dog so that he can look at the birds and the flowers calls the police, and the police come and demand to know what he is doing to bother that poor woman who is accusing him of attacking her. This kind of thing happens all the time, and it ought to be stopped. And it's an indication of the ignorance of people who think that skin color is indicative of a lack of intelligence and a lack of self-worth. It's time to give it up.
Well, and see, these black people, Jane, are being real patient with some of these people. Because I'll be honest with you, I'll be cussing some folk out constantly if you ask it basically for my papers like this is South African apartheid.
See, my heroes are black women when you talk about being patient. My heroes, and I'm not saying this to you because of who you are or what you are. I'm saying this to you because this is what I believe.
Mm-hmm.
For 300 years in this country, they have been patient. And they have watched us, and they have waited on us, and they have nursed our children, and they have raised our children, and they have done the hard work, and they are still saying, God will get us out of this. God will take care of this. All right. We have even turned God into an old white man with a long gray beard that looks like Charlton Heston playing Moses. And we've made Jesus, the baby Jesus, look like the little Pillsbury Doughboy. Now, that's a lot of power if you can change the color of God and Jesus. And that's what we have done in order to perpetuate the myth of race. And it isn't a myth, it's a lie. A myth is something that you make up to explain a physical phenomenon that you don't understand. A lie is something you make up to justify the ugly things that you're doing and saying and thinking and being. The lie of race has to be recognized, and it has to be stopped. It is killing this country.
I got a phone call today from a reporter who wanted to ask me about the protests in Portland. And he said there are some black folks who say that what these white folks in Portland are doing is just too much. This get away from the moment. And I said to him, we need some white folks who are checking other white folks. Reverend Jim Lawson, he said just like Black Lives Matter, he said we need to see white people. He said white men. He said protesting homelessness or wage discrimination, things along those lines. And so when we talk about moving forward, how do we create more Jane Elliott's, more Tim Wise's, in these cities. Because like we talk about race, I tell groups of white people, I was like, don't talk to me. I said, I need y'all talking to each other. Because y'all having conversations together that are different from the ones you having with me.
I think we have to send them all to Frederick Douglass. Just Google Frederick Douglass and the Frederick Douglass quotes. He said, if there's no struggle, there's no progress. These young people believe that. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. He said, where justice is denied, that's in the United States. Where poverty is enforced, that's in the United States. Where ignorance prevails, that's in the United States. And where any one class is made to feel that society is an organized conspiracy to oppress, rob, and degrade them, neither persons nor property will be safe. We had better straighten this thing out and straighten it out now. We have 30 years to get this thing right, to do it and to do it right. Because here's something else white folks don't realize. Only 25% of the people on the face of the earth classify as white. We have been outnumbered for centuries, and we are outnumbered more now than ever before. We better get our act together.
Jane, I'm glad you brought that up because I'm working on a book, and I talked about this here, and I basically call it white fear. And I remember in 2009, Obama elected president, and there was a study that was done. I think it was Pew, one of them. And the question was asked, are you optimistic about the future of America for your children? Every group, majority said yes. White America, only one less than the majority. September 2016, study was dropped. Are you optimistic about the future of America economically for the next 10 years? Black people, lowest wealth, highest optimism. Latinos, second lowest wealth, second highest optimism. White Americans, highest wealth, lowest optimism. And I kept telling people, I said, y'all better get ready. I said, 2009, I said, we are living in this age what I call white minority resistance. I said, now, even though they're not the minority, I said, we are about to see this thing develop and then all of a sudden begin to pick up. And that's what, to your point, here we are 23 years away from America becoming a nation majority of people of color. And you got folks who are going, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? That means we don't have power, so we're not going to be in control. Yeah. Okay, who's going to have the money? And so there's like, well, okay, who's going to control the textbooks? Okay, and that's why the Mitch McConnells of the world are appointing these 35 and 45-year-old, largely white males, far right, to be on the federal bench for the next 30, 40, and 50 years because their deal is we want to control this for as long as we can, and they want to use it through the court system.
I did a program with Angela Davis at the University of Houston a year or so ago. And that audience, there were 1,500 people in the audience, half of them were black. And this one white woman stood up and said, well, if they get power, and I knew who she was talking about, aren't they going to want to get even with us? I said, that's your major fear, isn't it? That black people are going to get even. She said, yes, I think they will. I said, let's find out. Well, every person in this audience who considers him or herself a member of the black race and who wants to get even with all white folks, please stand up. 3 young black males stood up. The rest of them just looked at him like, are you out of your mind? And I said to the woman, see, they don't want to get even with all of us. Do you feel better? Well, yeah. Does that make you more comfortable? Yeah. I said, but now let's be honest about this. Well, every black person in this room who wants to get even with 1 or 2 white people, please stand up. Every one of them jumped up, high-fiving one another. I tell you, it was the best moment of my life. And I said, now how do you feel? She said, I don't know. I said, here's what you need to know. If you want to be treated fairly in the future, treat people fairly today. Behave in such a way that you aren't one of the 1 or 2 they want to get even with. Does that make sense to you? And the blacks were all cheering, and she's just looking, I don't know. She doesn't know what to do. She doesn't know how to treat people fairly. But if she wants to live comfortably in the future, she's going to have to learn that.
Oh, my God. So when you said that, Pat Buchanan literally wrote that in one of his crazy columns. He's like, are they going to do to us what we did to them? And I'm going, I'm like, what you should be saying is, why did we do that to them? And what should we be doing to apologize and also mend and repair? Mitch Landrieu, in his book dealing with taking out the Confederate statues, he literally wrote, he said, white people, I've known black people all my life. Trust me, they're not us. They're not going to do to us what we did to them.
Well, and when I do the exercise with a group, when the blue and I don't reverse it with adults, but I do it with children. And the blue-eyed people are on the bottom the first time every time. And they say in the boys' restroom, we're going to get even with Brownie when it's our turn. And the day they're on the top, the blue-eyed people are much less vicious to the brown-eyed people than the brown-eyed people were to them. And I say to them when we do the debriefing and the third day, you blue-eyed kids said you were going to get even with the brown-eyed kids. You didn't do it. Why didn't you do it? And every year I get the same answer because I found out how it feels to be treated that way. And I didn't want to make anybody feel the way I felt when I was on the bottom. I think that our only hope is that's what Black people feel. They know how it feels. They know the disruption that it causes in a society. And they know they don't want to have that blamed onto them.
But also, Black people, the reality is Black folks are forgiving. We have been trained, conditioned. I mean, we forgive. Look, after the Charleston, Mother Emanuel, 9 Black people being killed. I remember watching cable news. They kept saying, "Oh my goodness! I mean, do you believe this? All the talk about forgiveness and compassion." And I'm sitting there going, "I'm like, y'all white folks still mad about 9/11." And so this society has always said to African Americans, "Oh, you must forgive and move on. You must not hold grudges and whatever." And so that's
They forgive, but they don't forget.
Say it again.
They forgive, but they don't forget. And that's what bothers white folks. It's one thing to be forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
It's another thing for people to forget the ugly things you've said and done and helped to happen, and the people you have elected in order to keep you in your place.
We just had this lawyer shoot and kill the husband of a Latina federal judge, killed her son. This guy hated women. He could not stand. He killed another lawyer in California. Jane, right now, you have groups who are specifically targeting white men who are saying you are aggrieved that what is happening. They are trying to destroy you. They're cutting you out. They're taking everything from you. How do we ensure or how do we combat this specific targeting of young white men that to ensure that 20, 30 years from now, all of a sudden, they're not turning into mentally where these militia people are and where these neo-Nazis are. And so that thing is happening. And I see it in the writings. And, oh, my goodness, as a white man, I can't speak up. Oh, what about me? I mean, I didn't do these things to people in the past. How am I? I don't have any male white privilege, things along those lines. What must this society do to combat the targeting of those fertile minds?
We have to put a stop. Number one, we have to put a stop to the mercenaries that are in Seattle and in Portland in the guise of federal law officers. We'd better take a look at those mercenaries and take off the combat stuff and look at who's under those clothes. And you're going to find out that they are not lawfully elected people. They are people who are hired by somebody who wants to have mercenaries come in and shut down a protest. I think if we would educate in a proper way that white people would relax, and so could everybody else. But as long as white people think they have to maintain their superiority, even though they don't have the intelligence to do it, but they and if you think I'm lying about that, look at our president. Do you really think he has the intelligence to be in the position he's in?
Oh, no.
We have a lot of white people who are in positions which do not deserve the positions they're in because they don't know enough. They really, for instance, there's a book called The Color of Law. It's about the laws that are made to force segregation in this country. And we say it's de facto segregation. No, those laws to force segregation were written by people, lawyers, educated, so-called educated people who don't know any better. They really believe that there are 3 or 4 races and that we all want to be separated from those who don't look like us. It's a lie. Our laws are built on the lies of ignorant people and people who believe the lie of several different races. We've got to get that idea out of people's heads. We've got to do it now.
And even if that law was repealed or removed, the effect of that law, I saw the Washington Post had a story this weekend that showed a home in Prince George's County, because of lack of investment, sells for $120,000, $130,000 less than a similar home in Montgomery County. And they said right there, that's a black family typically in Prince George's County is going to get $120,000 to $130,000 fewer dollars in that white family. Right there, you're speaking about your wealth gap.
But if you trade with places like Walmart, which is designed deliberately to make money for the Walton family, so you pay people less than they're worth, and you work them for less than 8 hours a day, less than 40 hours a week, so you don't have to pay benefits, so they don't make enough money to buy a decent house, so they live in substandard housing. And then when you decide that you're going to regentrify the neighborhood, they have to find another place to live so that you can sell that property to some middle-class people who can afford to live in a nicer home. This is all about how to make money off the backs of black people, which we have been doing for the 400 years that they've been in this country. Racism is a moneymaker.
Yep.
It is an absolute moneymaker.
Few more questions before we have to end this. Y'all, trust me, YouTube and Facebook and Periscope is blowing up. They're loving you, Jane.
Not all of them.
No, most of them are, and many of them are saying you're welcome to the cookout. So that's what.
I'll bring potato salad. I do that well.
So no raisins in that, right, Jane?
Oh, in potato salad? Wash your mouth out. Heavens, no.
I just want to go ahead and mess with you on that one.
Potato salad. I never heard anything so foolish.
Let's talk about statues. First, should the Edmund Pettus Bridge be named after John Lewis? Should these Confederate statues come down? Should the Christopher Columbus statues come down?
Well, see, I don't mind having the statues up because pigeons crap on them. So I really don't, that's not a big problem for me. And kids throw things at them, and it's a good thing to lean on when you're tired after you've been running. So I think that we need to tell the truth about the people who are represented by those statues, and then people will do what the pigeons do, because we'll realize that those are the wrong statues to be put up anywhere. But if they're up there, might as well deface them. If we're going to be insisting that you honor those people who did dishonorable acts, then we need to make those statues something, an object of ridicule. Instead of tearing them down, it takes a lot of money to tear those statues down, then you have to find a place for them. Use them for, I don't know, target practice, something interesting. Use them for something that, hey, we're going about this the wrong way. When you tear away people's statues, you tear away their self-image. So let them see what your self-image looks like when it isn't so pretty anymore. This is ridiculous. Arguing over those statues is taking your attention off what is happening in this country to people of color. It's taking your attention off the fact that the Navajo Nation is dying of COVID-19, which should be called Trump virus. Let's talk about that, shall we? Let's talk about what is happening to the Navajo Nation, who were here long before we palefaces got here. They don't have anything but dirt floors, and they have no electricity and no running water, and they're dying. And they're 100 miles from a hospital. Because after all, they aren't important.
Fox News scared to call me, so is CNN. I barely get called by MSNBC. Why are these mainstream networks scared of you, Jane?
Why are they? Because if I'm right, they're wrong. They're afraid of me the same reason that 55 teachers in the Riceville school system were afraid of me and absolutely hated me. Because I taught that you don't have to be white to be right. I disagree with the rightness of whiteness. And I taught that every person on this earth is my 30th to 50th cousin. And I get really angry when some of my pale-faced cousins abuse some of my darker-skinned cousins. It makes me really, really angry because it isn't about skin color. It's about ignorance. And as long as we perpetuate the ignorance of several different races, we will have this problem. You want to get rid of racism? Get rid of the idea of several different races. Then you have to say, we're all the same race. What's your problem, fool?
How would you describe Betsy DeVos?
Fool. Damn fool. Destructive damn fool.
Let's say Joe Biden becomes president. Um, if he said, Jane, I would love for you to work with my Department of Education, would you do it?
Heavens no. I'd say, Joe, you're out of your mind. I'm 10 years older than you are. Get real.
But you would, you would have value.
Well, I would have value until I walked into that office and looked at it and thought, why am I here? There are young people of all colors and all kinds who could do this job better than an old, short, fat, white woman could. Why in the world would I take that job knowing that I am not qualified for it? If I wanted to be president, now that's a job I'd take because we have proof that you don't have to be qualified to get that one.
Jane, you're 86, correct?
Well, I'm 86, but I'm not correct. But yeah, I'm 86.
No. You are correct. You're very correct. How are you? How are you? How are you creating the army of Jane Elliott's?
I'm not creating an army of Jane Elliott. What I want to do is get every person that hears my voice to believe that there's only one race, and they don't have to believe the lies that they've been taught so far, and that they're willing to go to my website, download the printed learning materials. The first is a set of typical statements that white folks make that think they aren't racist. The second is a set of clarifications of those remarks. The third is a set of commitments to combat racism. And the fourth is a bibliography. I want them to go through that those printed learning materials. I want them to learn how not to talk by doing the commitments, the clarifications of the typical statements, and then pick out one of those commitments, put the date beside it, decide to do it for a month, and do that until you've gone through all 18 of those. We can change the level of racism in this country if we change one individual at a time. Now somebody's going to say, racism is a societal problem. Yeah, I know that. But societies are made up of individuals. And if we change enough individuals, we can turn this thing around. And we have to. We have to do that.
But the reason I asked that question, Marva Collins taught a number of folks her Socratic teaching method. And what you have been able to accomplish, I mean, are there others who are picking up that mantle, who are saying, we want to continue your work, and then that thing begins to spread? Because again, the reason I use army is because, look, you're one person. You're one person. And I think there is tremendous value of folks who learn from you, study underneath you, and then who says, you know what, I want to run this race too.
I've tried to teach people how to do this, and I've succeeded with maybe 3 out of the 25 that I've tried to teach. Because invariably, when you say, now it's your turn, now you do this, and they say, 5 minutes into it, they say, I can't be that mean. And I say, what do you mean you can't be that mean? You see this happen on the street all the time. You act this way all the time. This is what you do on a regular basis. But when you have to do it publicly, you can't be that mean. Let me tell you, we white folks know how to be that mean. We know how to run this exercise. We know exactly how to run this exercise because we run it based on skin color all day, every day. And any fool educator who says, I don't know how to do that, needs to have have somebody come in and videotape her during a school day and then show it to her. And she'll say to herself, and probably to that person, oh my God, I did what Jane Elliott does. And I did it based on skin color. Don't tell me you don't know how to do it, because you do, white folks. You've been doing it for 300 years and you're still doing it. You know it and I know it, but the difference is I admit it and live with it and learn from it and teach it. I'd love to have a dozen people come to my house this summer and go to my little church next day that I've turned into a guest house, and I'll teach them how to do this exercise, and I'll charge them for doing it. And then I'll expect them to do it. There's a woman in the Netherlands. Her name is Shida Berman. I taught her and the person she works with and several other people do the exercise, and she's doing it with police departments in Netherlands and having terrific success with it. Because once you let a white person find out how it feels to be under the heel of somebody else because of a difference in that person, a physical characteristic over which we have no control, all of a sudden, it's, my God, I didn't know. And I'll never forget the black man in Scotland, who doesn't matter, Scotland, and he was black, so he was all right. He had brown eyes. His wife was blue-eyed and sitting in the middle, And she had a little girl, a little tiny child that was crying. And I said, why don't you take that child? And he said, she's the mother. That's her job. That's the way blue-eyed people are. And I thought, well, you miserable SOB. And after it was over, he said, it's a system. It's a system. I thought it just happened. I thought it was natural. I said, no, it's not natural. We teach people to be idiotic. It is a system. Get a clue. This is a system that is hard on all of us. But you see, we white folks think it doesn't hurt us any. It does hurt us. It limits our associations. It limits our loves. You need to realize that we have had laws against miscegenation in this country for years. You can't have a black person and a white person married. People, you can't cross a cat with a dog and get a dat or a cog because they're different species. You can cross people of different color groups and get brilliant, wonderful, beautiful children. We do it all the time. Get over it. We are all members of the same race. There is no such thing as a biracial child or a multiracial group unless some of them are from another planet.
Two questions. First question, two questions left. First question. Have you ever done this exercise with a group of white preachers?
I've had white preachers in the exercise, but I've never done it with a group of them because, oh my, they would pray hard. And they'd find out, as we often find out, that prayer didn't change it. White preachers have been praying to put an end to this for years. What they haven't done is teach and first believe that there's only one race, believe that Jesus probably was an Ethiopian Jew, which made him black, believe that Mary did not look like a skinny Marilyn Monroe, and believe that Jesus didn't look like the little Pillsbury Doughboy. We've got to start teaching the truth in the churches. We don't dare do that because we'll lose a whole lot of our parishioners. Those white folks want to believe that lie that we teach in the schools and the churches in this country.
Last question. If a young person, if a man or a woman, anywhere in the world, stumbles across one of your videos 50 years from now, 100 years from now, what do you want that person to know about Jane Elliott?
Oh, the only thing that's important about Jane Elliott, make no mistake about this, is I had a father who was totally moral and totally honest and moral, and said, you know the difference between right and wrong? Now do the right thing, goddamn. And he also said, a man is judged by the company he keeps, and the best of companies, none too good. He would be furious about our so-called president who lives in the president's residence now. He said, there's a right and a wrong, do the right thing. That's all. I believe that what I'm doing is the right thing. And I believe 50 years from now, what I'm doing will be a joke because everybody will have stopped believing in the rightness of whiteness. And they'll say, well, why is anybody making a fuss over that? What was she talking about? That stuff doesn't happen anymore because hopefully in 50 years, it won't happen anymore. Hopefully we will raise a group of people starting this fall, if school ever starts, where teachers have educated them to the fact that we're all members of the same race. We are all equally human.
I know I chased you down like a bill collector to get you on the show. I appreciate you answering the email. It has not because you're even here right now. The opportunity to meet you 3 years ago at the University of Michigan was amazing. And I've done a lot of keynote speeches and I've done panels. That by far is a top 3 discussion. I just had an absolute joy being with you at the University of Michigan in 2017. And I appreciate you coming on the show tonight.
So thank you. Angela Davis, after she saw me attack the little children, all the children in the University of Houston, said, Jane, we could go on the road together. I said, tell me when, I'll go.
Well, look, I'll be happy to go on the road with you as well. Once this coronavirus stuff is gone, these dumbasses know how to put masks on.
And be sure they get one of these.
That's right. Get over it.
One of these.
Get over it. Jane Elliott, it's a pleasure. You take care. Be safe.
Thank you. You too.
All right, folks. Thank you so very much. All of you who watched this conversation with Jane Elliott, our coverage with Congressman John Lewis. Fascinating conversation. We look forward to restreaming this. Again, this is why we do what we do, folks, here. You're not going to hear that conversation mainstream media. Not for a little more than an hour. That's why we want you to support what we do at Roland Martin Unfiltered. More than 4,000 of y'all are on YouTube right now. Y'all can join our Bring the Funk fan club right there on YouTube. Folks, Cash App, which is $RM Unfiltered, PayPal.me/R Martin Unfiltered, Venmo.com/RM Unfiltered. Of course, you can send a money order to New Vision Media, NU Vision Media Inc., 1625 K Street Northwest, Suite 400, Washington, D.C., 2006. Please support what we do. We have a little more than 10,000 members about Bring the Funk Fan Club. Our goal is to have 20,000 by the end of the year, so we're about 8,800. Our goal is to get 8,800 more people to give at least $50 each at $4.19 a month, 13 cents a day to support what we do for us to be able to bring you these type of conversations that you're not getting anywhere else. It ain't happening on ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox News, MSNBC, CNN. It's not happening on any of these places. That's why we are creating this platform, because we want to do more. Today, not a single black network broadcast the U.S. Capitol event dealing with Congressman John Lewis. We want to be able to build this platform and grow this to a digital network where we are giving you live coverage of events like that, live coverage of panels that involve Jane Elliott and others, and be able to do more shows like this. But we need your support to actually make that happen. So please support us by joining our Bring the Funk Fan Club. Go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Tell a family member, tell a friend, tell a church member. We are building this for the culture. This is about us being able to control the narrative, and we need your support to make it happen. All right, folks. And don't forget, go to vote.org. Check your registration. Check your registration to see if you're registered. Request your absentee ballot right now. We've got to mobilize, organize, register, request the ballot, vote early, and hashtag Fire Trump in November. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Ho!
It's time to be smart. When we control our institutions, we win. This is the most important news show on television of any racial background. Y'all put $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30 on this and keep this going. What you've done, Roland, since this crisis came out in full bloom. Anybody watching this, tell your friends. Go back and look at the last 2 weeks, especially of Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, hell, go back and look at the last 2 days. You've had sitting United States senators today, Klobuchar and Harris. Whatever you have, you can bring to Roland Martin Unfiltered to support it. Please do, because this information may literally save your life.
Watch Roland Martin Unfiltered daily at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, or go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.